Hello friends, welcome to Gyna and Ops lecture. In today's lecture, we are going to talk about ovarian cycle. So first we'll see that what is ovarian. Of menstrual cycle is 28 days of in two organ. One is ovary and of the uterus, endometrium of the uterus. So the cyclical ovary is called as ovarian cycle. Ovarian cycle. So this is cyclical changes during these 28 days that are occurring in endometrium is called as endometrial cycle. So we can say that during this 28 days of menstrual cycle, two cycle runs parallelly. One is ovarian cycle and another one is endometrial cycle. During ovarian cycle, as we can see that from first to 14 days, the release of ova on 14th day. So this phase is called as related with the follicular growth. On 14th day, the release of ova, or this is called as day of ovulation. Day of ovulation. Day of ovulation. Day of ovulation. And after ovulation, the remaining follicle is converted into yellow body, which is called as corpus luteum, and this phase is called as luteal phase. Luteal phase. During the follicular phase, the hormone from the growing follicle, and this estrogen will go into the circulation and causes proliferation of the endometrium. So in endometrium, there is proliferation of endometrium. Later on, after ovulation, this corpus luteum is releasing mainly progesterone and estrogen. So this progesterone will go into the circulation and causes secretion in the endometrial gland. As you can see, the glands are filled with secretion. So this phase of endometrial cycle is called as secretory phase. Secretory phase. So in ovary, there is follicular phase and luteal phase, and almost parallelly in endometrium, there is proliferative phase and then secretory phase. So in this lecture, we are going to discuss in detail about the ovarian cycle. So before discussing the ovarian cycle, first we'll see that what are the phases of follicle. So the follicle grow from primordial to pre-ovulatory, pre-ovulatory, as you can see. So from primordial to pre-ovulatory stage of the follicle, there are two phases. One is called as FSH independent, which is not depend on FSH, so it is called as FSH independent, and this phase is called as another phase is called as FSH dependent. So growth of the follicle is under two phases. One is FSH independent, another one is FSH dependent. So FSH independent phase from primordial to pre-enteral, because in this phase there is no FSH receptors, so they are not responding to follicular stimulating hormone, and from primordial to pre-enteral, this growth is totally under the local factors, that is autocrine and paracrine factors. Autocrine and paracrine factor. At this stage, that is pre-enteral to early enteral, there is development of FSH receptors over the granulosa cells, FSH receptors. So they are going to respond the FSH. That's why from early enteral to pre-ovulatory is the FSH dependent growth phase. So if we talk about the total phase from primordial to pre-ovulatory is roughly around 1 year, and from early antral to pre-ovulatory, that is roughly around 14 days. 14 days. And before that, 285 to 290 is the primordial to preantral. So we can say that under local autocrine and paracrine effect, the growth of the follicle is very slow. It takes too much time, that is 285 to 290 days. And under FSH dependent, the growth is very fast, that is in 14 days only, from early antral to pre-ovulatory. So this is about the follicular phase, different phases of follicular growth. Now coming to the follicular phase of the ovary. So ovary is under the control of two major gland, that is pituitary gland and hypothalamus. So hypothalamus releases GnRH, that is gonadotropin releasing hormone, in pulsatile manner, that is very important, because if it is in continuous manner, there will be no stimulation. So gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, and these gonadotropin releasing hormone will stimulate the anterior pituitary to release two gonadotropins, that is LH and FSH. And these LH and FSH will go into the circulation and reach to the ovary and stimulate the ovarian follicle to grow. So once there will be release of FSH from the anterior pituitary, there will be recruitment of the follicle, and during each cycle there is growth of recruitment of 15 follicles, and this recruitment is totally based on the FSH receptors. That means those follicles which are having FSH receptors, or we can say that those follicles which are at the stage of early antral, they are going to respond to this FSH and they will start growing. So around 15 follicles during each cycle start growing. And if we zoom in the picture of one follicle, we can see clearly that this is theca cell, this is the granulosa cell, and this brown layer is nothing but the basement membrane. And because of this basement membrane, these blood vessels are not able to invade up to the granulosa layer. That's why the granulosa layer is a vascular, because of this basement membrane. So we can say that blood supplies totally up to the theca layer. So if we see the estrogen and progesterone, that is the steroid hormone, and the ovary produces the steroid hormone, and the precursor of steroid hormone is cholesterol. So because of the vascularity of the theca cell and avascularity of the granulosa cell, the cholesterol precursor is only available up to the theca layer, or we can say the theca cell. H will stimulate this theca cell. There will be unlocking of genes which are able to produce all those enzymes that convert this cholesterol to androstenedione and testosterone. And these androstenedione and testosterone will diffuse to the granulosa cells, and because of the FSH stimulation, these androstenedione will get converted into beta 17 beta estradiol, because of unlocking of gene able to produce aromatase enzyme. So androstenedione will get converted into 17 beta estradiol because of this aromatase, which is produced as a result of FSH hormone. So this 17 beta estradiol will come into the circulation and will able to perform the certain functions. So here we'll discuss the functions of beta estradiol. So first function is it will reach to the endometrium, and there it will cause proliferation of the endometrium, and in uterus there will be proliferative phase. The second function is it will give negative feedback to the pituitary for FSH release through inhibin from the granulosa cell. So this granulosa cell will release this inhibin, and this inhibin will go to the pituitary and suppress the release of LH. So as a result of estradiol, there will be suppression of FSH, or we can say the negative feedback for FSH. Additionally, there will be release of LH from the anterior pituitary because of this estradiol. So it increases the LH release from the anterior pituitary. Another function which is performed by 17 beta estradiol, that is production of LH receptors over the theca as well as granulosa cell also. Granulosa cell, theca cell, and little bit over the granulosa cell. So these are the changes in the follicle during the growth. So let's summarize all those things that we have discussed in the previous slide. So this is the total duration of follicular phase, that is the 14 days. And during these 14 days of the follicular phase, what is happening? Under the influence of FSH, recruitment of the follicle, and follicle starts growing. And during the growth of the follicle, there is release of estradiol. So as you can see, the FSH level is rising and there is release of estrogen. And once the estrogen level is rising, as it gives negative feedback for FSH, so FSH start decreasing in concentration. So the level of FSH is decreasing as a result of estradiol production. So what will happen? As the follicles are going under the influence of FSH, so once the level of FSH comes down, there will be competition between all the growing follicles. So those follicles who are having more FSH receptors continue to grow, and the other who are not having that much receptors will start regressing or becomes atretic. So here you can see that 15 and means 15, then the number is reducing continuously. And this process will continue until the one follicle reach up to the stage of pre-ovulatory follicle. So FSH is increasing, then there is a release of estradiol. And once the estradiol level is rising, the FSH level comes down. And because of the FSH level is reducing, there is competitive environment between the growing follicles. So some continue to grow, those who are having more FSH receptors, and other follicles start regressing and become atretic. So this process will continue until one follicle reach up to the stage of pre-ovulatory follicle. Here you can see that estrogen is responsible for the release of LH, so the LH level is rising. So estrogen peak is roughly around, you can see 24 to 48 hours before ovulation, and this LH peak little after the estrogen peak, as estrogen is responsible for the LH release. So estrogen release precedes the estrogen peak precedes the LH peak. So this is the LH peak and this is the estrogen peak. So estrogen peak 24 to 48 hours before ovulation, and LH peak is roughly around 12 to 24 hours before ovulation. And what about the FSH peak? So FSH peak is on the mid of the follicular phase, that is on the 7th or 8th day. Here you can see that a second peak of the FSH, that is around ovulation. So the second peak of FSH We'll discuss later that what is the function of second FSH peak. So this is about the follicular phase and changes during the follicular phase of the ovarian cycle. So we'll see what are the functions of LH before the ovulation. So first is completion of first meiosis, which is going to occur just before ovulation or in the pre-ovulatory follicle. Second is after completion of first meiosis, there will be ovulation, that is the release of ova. Third is formation of corpus luteum, that is after ovulation, the remaining follicle is converted into corpus luteum. And the fourth one is it helps is steroidogenesis, as we discussed in the follicular phase, that under the influence of LH, the LDL cholesterol is converted into the androstenedione in theca cell, and during corpus luteum or luteal phase also it is responsible for the production of hormones, that is estrogen and progesterone, that we'll discuss later. So this is the functions of LH. First, one by one, we'll discuss from all these functions. So first we'll see that how the completion of first meiosis occurs. So completion of first meiosis, which is arrested since intrauterine life, the meiosis is arrested. So how it is arrested? If you can see in this picture that there is a gap junction between the granulosa cell and this oocyte membrane, and this is the nucleus. So what is happening? Because of this gap junction, granulosa cell able to send certain message to the nucleus of the oocyte to stop the meiosis, and that message is nothing but oocyte maturation inhibitor, or we can say certain chemicals, or so oocyte maturation inhibitor. So because of this message, or we can say because of this chemical, the nucleus is arrested or is under arrestion since intrauterine life up to the pre-ovulatory stage. So during pre-ovulation or just before ovulation, there is increase or peak level of LH, and this peak level of LH will disrupt this gap junction. So once this gap junction is disrupted, there is no message, or we can say oocyte maturation inhibitor from the granulosa cells, and ultimately the meiosis is the meiosis is completed. So by disrupting the gap junction, the LH is able to complete the meiosis 1. Next is rupture of follicle. How LH is able to perform the rupture of follicle? So until the early 1960s, it was believed that increase in the intrafollicular pressure is responsible for the follicular rupture, but recent evidence says that increase LH and FSH. So this is the second peak of FSH that we have discussed in previous slide, that increase LH and FSH just before ovulation is responsible for the release of plasmin, which is the product of plasminogen activator action on plasminogen. So this plasmin is able to cause softening of the outer layer of the ovary where the follicle is growing, because it is proteolytic, or the another mechanism, it activates the latent collagenases. So like this proteolytic activity will help in causing softening of the outer layer of the ovary where the follicle is growing and going to release the ova. The second is there is increased progesterone just before ovulation. Little bit progesterone is produced from the granulosa cells, and that increased progesterone is responsible for the prostaglandin release in the follicular fluid, and this prostaglandin is able to cause contraction theca externa, which acts as a smooth muscle. So the theca externa acts as a smooth muscle layer. So this prostaglandin causes contraction of the smooth muscle, so theca externa. So this will contract the smooth muscle, or we can say theca externa, and because of that the ova is released, because of that contractile activity of the outermost layer of the follicle, that is theca externa. So it will cause release of the, or rupture of the follicle and release of the ova. So these are the two recent theories, or we can say two recent um, hypothesis or researches regarding the rupture of follicle. So like this, the increased level of LH helps in the rupture of follicle or release of ova or ovulation. Next is formation of corpus luteum. So as I said that after release of the ova, the remaining follicle is going to convert into a yellow body that is called as corpus luteum. Corpus stands for body, and luteum comes from the lutein pigment that is present in the blood, a type of carotenoids. So this is actually yellow in color, so that's why it gives the color yellow to this corpus luteum. So during formation of corpus luteum, what are the major changes we'll see? The first change is destruction of basal lamina or basement membrane, that is that here between the granulosa and theca layer. So because of this basal lamina, the blood vessels were not able to penetrate to the granulosa layer. So once the destruction of basal lamina, there will be invasion of blood vessels to the granulosa layer and the development of new vessels in the granulosa layer, or we can say the neovascularization. So because of the invasion of blood vessels to the granulosa layer, now the LDL cholesterol precursors for steroid available to the granulosa cells also. Previously, it was limited to the theca cells, but now the granulosa cells are also provided with the LDL cholesterol. Next is the increased circulation up to the granulosa layer will cause the cellular hypertrophy. So that means the corpus luteal cells, especially the granulosa cells, which are having the new blood supply and are getting more nutrition, so they will be hypertrophied. As you can see here, there is no barrier outside or between the theca and granulosa cells. So blood vessels are able to reach up to the granulosa layer. So these are the major changes during corpus luteum formation. So now these cells of corpus luteum are very rich in blood supply. They are very large in size. All are filled with the cholesterol because the granulosa cells as well as the theca cells are getting the cholesterol because of the blood circulation. So they are loaded with LDL cholesterol and they are able to produce more and more steroid hormones, that is progesterone plus estrogen. So now come to the luteal phase as the corpus luteum is formed, as we have discussed. So now come to the luteal phase. So once this corpus luteum is formed, now we can see here that I have shown this picture is yellow because this is yellow color because the lutein pigment coming through the blood circulation, and also there is cholesterol in the theca cell as well as in the granulosa cell. Here you can see, and as I have discussed that the LH receptors during follicular phase are developing more and more over the theca as well as over the granulosa cells because of the stradiol. So now what is going to happen in luteal phase? So because of the LH stimulation to the theca cell, this LDL cholesterol will get converted into androstenedione in the similar manner as we discussed in follicular phase. And this androstenedione will go into the granulosa cells and will get converted to the 17 beta estradiol. But here there is no FSH stimulation. Here you can see that LH stimulation will induce both the conversion of androstenedione to diazation, which was previously performed by FSH, but now LH is able to perform. And similarly, this LH stimulation will able to convert those LDL cholesterol, which are now available in the granulosa cell also, to progesterone. So stimulation of LH to granulosa cell convert LDL to progesterone, and also able to unlock the aromatase, which is able to convert androstenedione to 17 beta estradiol. So in this manner, the progesterone estrogen is produced from the corpus luteum and is increasing into the circulation from the corpus luteum. Now what will happen? Once this progesterone is produced from the corpus luteum, it will give negative feedback to the pituitary for LH. For LH. So that means the increased level of progesterone pituitary. So it will reduce the LH release from the pituitary. So here we can see this is the luteal phase, the hormonal level the second day, and this is 28th day. So during luteal phase, what is happening? As you can see, the corpus luteum is producing this progesterone. This progesterone. So because of the increasing level of progesterone, there is decrease in the is coming down. As you can see here, the LH is responsible for the production of the hormones. So once the LH level, if LH level is coming down, as you can see here, so once the LH level comes down, there will be no hormone synthesis, so you can say decrease in the synthesis of estrogen and progesterone, because LH only is responsible for the synthesis of all these hormones from the corpus luteum. So progesterone reduces the LH secretion, and LH reduces the progesterone. LH is reducing, so again the progesterone and estrogen all are coming down, and up to hormone comes to baseline. And once the estrogen and progesterone comes at baseline, again there will be stimulation for the release of GnRH, and there is a start of a new cycle or new ovarian cycle, because estrogen and progesterone is very low in concentration, or we can say at baseline. So hypothalamus will start releasing GnRH, as there is no negative feedback, so it will get back, and there is a start of new ovarian cycle. So in this manner, the uh, ovarian cycle, or we can say the cyclical changes in the ovary uh, take place. So this was all regarding the ovarian cycle. Hope you like this video. Hope you all are able to understand. So thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. If you like, please hit the like button also.